Good morning, everyone. Britt Simon here. Hope you're all well. Happy Saturday morning for you. And good morning to you in New York. That's nice. I like it when I hear from people within America. It seems like, perhaps they've got their green card already. So that's really cool. Uncle B says, confusion. You're ready. Good. Glad to hear it. Okay. Let's see. So I've got a couple of updates that I wanted to give you all. So obviously this week we've got the lawsuit has now been filed. The impact lawsuit, I believe, has been filed today. I haven't seen the name, but also the Curtis Morrison lawsuit, Red Eagle Law lawsuit, it has been filed just over a week ago now. And so both of those are running. Now, I've talked before about I thought it was possible that the government will remove the pauses without even being sued. I thought that was possible at some point, right? But we'll now never know. Because I just want to draw your attention to the fact that if the government were to remove the pauses now, if they do that, if by some chance they remove that, they already have been sued. And so from this point forward, since they've been sued, we can only really say, look, we don't know for sure whether they would have removed those pauses or not. The lawsuits have happened now. We're also over 90 days, and I just wanted to cover that as well. In previous comments, people asked me how long I thought the pause could last, and it's not so much how long the pause could last, but I did explain before that it's a question of when the pause goes from being reasonable to unreasonable in terms of what a court would assess. And I said, a pause of 30 days or 60 days perhaps would be hard to argue as unreasonable. Whereas when the pause is in place for 90 days plus, it becomes, unreasonable. Now, I don't think there's a very, very clear delineation of what's reasonable and what's unreasonable. This is all a matter of sort of, it's a subjective opinion of when a court would find a delay like this to be unreasonable as opposed to reasonable. But it's an important distinction because, that's going to be part of the lawsuit's arguments. They're going to try and argue that the lawsuits, so the pauses were arbitrary and capricious in the way they were implemented. They're going to say that they have caused harm, and they're going to say that that they are unreasonable. The delay is unreasonable, particularly as it's clearly causing harm. And on the causing harm piece, I do want to. That's one of the things I want to talk about and update you on that, because that's an important point. And I talked about this before, and I'm actually going to prepare a report for the two law firms, because I want them to truly understand how visible it is, this impact of the the pauses. So let me just show you some data here as I present that. Let me just pop that out. Yeah. So Zarthesius very kindly published the data again yesterday for what will be the first week after the initial visa bulletin was issued for May interviews. So we now have our first count of how many 2NLs have gone out for May, right? And we'll compare them to last month, which I already know was a low month. And what I want to do is I want to paint this picture very, very clearly for the law firms. I want to show them the history of how many 2NLs normally are sent by region over the last couple of years. So I'll give them DV24 and DV25 numbers, and I'll plot that out for them so that they can see the pattern of how many 2NLs are sent on a monthly basis to each of the regions. And then it'll become very obvious when we then plot this data against that. It'll become very obvious that there has been an impact and therefore harm has been caused by the pauses. Now, if the pauses were, allowed all the interviews to go ahead, and at some point they removed the pause, and then everybody got their visas issued. The government would try and argue that they had caused no harm, but since capacity has been thrown away or lost, and we can't get that capacity back, right? Since it's clear that that has happened, then there has been harm caused. There will be less visas issued. People will have lost their visas. We don't know who individually, but we do know that some people will have lost their visas, and that's the harm that has been caused. And it's important for the lawsuit that you can demonstrate harm has been caused. So I need to put this information in front of the law firms just to make sure that they understand the impact of that. But you can see the numbers here. Now, last month, 1,322 2NLs were sent out for EU region. So far this month, because they didn't increase the visa bulletin, they've sent out 670. Now, I think that number will increase. I think that we'll probably see some more interview 2NLs being sent out this week, but it's trending lower. And I don't know yet whether Ankara have received their cases or not. I haven't checked that, but it is trending lower, and I think that's an important thing that we need to consider. The other thing, which is far more damning from the point of view of the harm that's being caused, is this number last month: 469 interviews being sent for African AF region cases. Right now, these are AF region cases wherever in the world they were being interviewed. We don't know which embassy they're at, but we do know how many AF region cases were being scheduled. And I'll be able to show you data from DV25 and DV26, where they've scheduled like 2,000 cases for the African region in a single month. So scheduling 469 and then following up so far with only 342 seems to me that they're going to have another low month. That's problematic, right? That's a big problem. And it clearly shows that they're not getting where they need to get to. We can also see, by the way, if we look at the data, there is some movement. I have to say I'm quite pleased with that. But I did account there's about 100 and I think it's 115 cases have been scheduled between 35,000 in Africa and 51,000 or so, 55,000 in that sort of higher number country range, higher number region range. In those higher numbers, only 115 cases have been scheduled. And you can see that a little bit here. As I was explaining last week, in EU, we're starting to fill in the gaps. So we're starting to see these numbers going up this week. That's really what's happening. You can see that blue color there. That's the new cases that have just had 2NL sent. And that's increasing the number of scheduled cases within that higher number range. So the 20,000 number we'll be able to see at the end of this period of scheduling. We'll be able to see how bad the damage was caused by not increasing the EU number to 20,000. But it is allowing a little bit more fairness, shall we say, in the under 20,000 range, in terms of some embassies are catching up with their backlog, right? Now, I would prefer to keep that they keep going and keep scheduling as much as possible, but that takes them. I wanted them to lead with the visa bulletin numbers. That's what they should have done, in my opinion, and that's why I was expecting them to issue a number between 25,000 for EU and perhaps 30,000 for EU. 25 to 30,000 would have been a good stretching target, but we'll be able to see what they do anyway with the under 20,000 range. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about, I may as well just sort of show you this, is this tracker. Basically, I created this tracker this week with the magic that is AI, and using AI tools to do some development for me. So I was able to put this together very, very quickly. I mean, it's insane how fast you can develop applications now using AI. But that's an aside. But the point of this is important. Let me just talk about this first and sort of then show you the data. So when we lost the complete visibility to the SEAC data, what happened was we got partially blinded. We can see that 2NLs are being sent, but we don't know which embassies they're going to. And so we don't know anything, and we don't know anything about the case once it's gone to the embassy. We don't know whether cases are being put on 221G or if they're not being issued at the moment, but we don't know if they're issued or refused or whatever. We don't know. And we used to know that information. That was important information to know, particularly to know which embassies are backlogged and not backlogged and so on. So during the course of the year, we have a couple of times when I'm really concerned that we have that sort of data. And my answer to that a couple of months ago, when we realized that we had lost visibility to the embassy specific data, I then told people in the first couple of weeks or so, 2, 3, 4 weeks, to form groups within your local area. So there should be a group for Kenya, and there should be a group for Germany, and so on, and that you could share information. But that has sort of up and down results. It's not a perfect way to share information on where scheduling is being done and so on, or who's waiting for cases to be scheduled. It's not a perfect way, and we don't have global visibility. It's just localized information. So you don't have the ability, for example, if you're at Nairobi embassy or whatever, and you're waiting for your interview, you don't have the ability, unless you've got that localized data, to know where they've got to in terms of scheduled numbers. Nor do you have the ability, if you're planning to move to, let's say, Germany. I'm just using Germany as an example. But if you were moving to Germany, could you move your case there, or should you move your case there? Well, it would be nice for you to be able to look somewhere and say, well, how far ahead are they in scheduling, or are they up to date in scheduling in Germany, right? Or in France, or wherever the hell you're going, right? And so, and there's no good way to do that, because if you're all in localized groups, the information being shared in localized groups is good, but it's only good for your local area. And so I recognized that we needed some sort of tool, and and the main way of having that tool is by collecting data, by encouraging you to help me collect that data. Okay, so that's what this tool is about. So I just, like I say, I threw this together pretty quickly. I spent no more than a couple of hours, but you'll come to this page and you'll be able to log in into this page and submit your data through this application, right? So you'll be able to submit your data. It'll then prompt you for an email address, and you'll get a link sent to your email. So it has to be a genuine email that you're going to use. You're then going to submit some data in there, and the data you're going to submit basically is going to be this sort of thing. You'll put your case range. Actually, you're going to put your exact case number, and the tool will figure out your case range. People, for some reason, struggle with this, but I'm asking you to put your exact number in, the year, the region, and your exact number. The tool will then hide your number for you, and the tool will only store the hidden number. So in other words, if you enter your case number is AF 27,123, it will put the 27XXX on there for you, and it will be stored in the database as 27XXX, right? So you don't have to think how much of that to hide, and we'll have a consistent approach. There, of course, some people will misunderstand it. We'll get data like I'm showing on this line, down here, but I'll be able to correct that in the database as it sits. And so it's not a perfect tool. There's always a trade-off between understanding that lots of non-computer users are going to be using this system, and how hard or easy you make it for them to use it, and trying to get clean data into the system, right? So it's not a perfect tool by any means, but I can tweak this over time. I can improve it over time. My main sort of goal was to produce the tool now, so that we can maybe use it in DV26, but this will be much more important in DV27. And so, this is the way I would like to collect poll information, and case number information, and case status information as we go through. So you're going to put in your case number. You'll have put in your region. I'm asking you to put in your country of chargeability, and the embassy country that you're based at as well. I'm going to ask you to track your submission date, the date when your case is processed, and whether or not you unlock or not, and then when you receive your 2NL and when the interview happens, right? And then the outcome as well. Now, because you're able to log in with your email, the reason that I'm insisting on having the email is that you can log back into this and correct your record as time moves on, right? So you'll initially create this and say, yeah, I'm a winner, but I haven't even submitted my DS260 yet. So your DS260 submission date will be blank. Then you submit that and so on, and you'll come back and you'll keep this updated. And by doing that, we'll then be able to see, okay, so for example, the first three happen to be in Kenya. In Kenya, I see they sent 2NLs to case number 11,000 on the 12th of January 2026. Okay, cool. And then 15 and 16,000 got their 2NLs on the 22nd of February 26, right? Which are for April interviews. So now, again, this data is only as good as the data you collect. And some of you will screw it up, let's be honest. That's going to happen. But at least we can sort of begin to sort of figure some things out. What's the difference in time between the time when you enter your DS260 and when it's processed? We'll be able to track that. People will be able to sort of see some of that information. People always get very worried about unlocking. You really shouldn't. Unlocking doesn't cause delays, and some of you will argue with me till the cows come home about that, but I know it doesn't, and I've proven it doesn't. But some of you still don't want to accept that. So I've put in a yes/no flag so that you can say whether you've unlocked your case or not, and that will help to allay some of the other people's fears. And then, by capturing the 2NL, we can then see for individual embassies whether we're backlogged or not. So you'll be able to see, and I'll be able to put some charts together, some nice pretty little charts. I've put a couple of examples there, and you'll be able to get information by by your country as well. You'll see how many cases there are by country. This is a simple tool to use. I think it's going to be useful to us. I hope you'll use it, and if many of you use it, we'll have good data. But it's only as good as the data we have. So I can't pluck this data out of thin air. So I'm going to put the tracker link there in the chat, and by all means go and have a look at that. And by all means, please do feel free to add your case. Pretty simple little app. You should be able to figure that out. Okay. So I hope that's useful to you. What else did I want to show you? That I've talked about. I am also this week going to float this mail shipping service. So I've created another app which is to collect data for people that want to have me receive their Greencard and SSN, hold that for them, and then send it to an address once they're in America. So this will help people. This is probably going to be more for DV27 folks, because sometimes people are, they don't have a good address to use on the DS260. So this will give them an address to put in on the DS260. And then later they can decide, they can modify that address if they want on the DS260. They can change that as late as the port of entry. But if they do decide to use the shipping service, then they would have to pay me a fee. I'm charging for this particular service. They'll pay me a fee, which they get details about when they register for this. They'll pay a fee, and then that will cover the cost of me shipping the FedEx documents out for the SSN and for the Greencard as and when I receive them. And then if more people, and right now, I mean, I've run this service for a few people on a requested basis, and it's working. I have a special address that people can have things sent to. The address is very near to my house, and then I'll get better. I must admit, up to now, I've been remiss in collecting the post from there on a regular basis and then sending things out. I've been bad at that because I'm just frankly very busy. But as as what I've done is I've made the fee enough that I can pay someone to run this service properly and do this on a more professional basis. So that should get better. But it works. and it's a useful thing for a lot of you that that will need that address, right? So that's something else I'm going to be launching this week. Again, I'll publish details about that on my blog. Okay. All right, that's all I really wanted to cover as updates. Let's take some questions and see what people have got to say. Let's see. Greetings, Uncle Britt. Let's see. What do you think? Will DV27 open in April or not? I don't know. The finalization of the rules. We got two new rules now, right? One is for the passport and one is for the $1 fee. Both of those rules will now be final by April 10th. The $1 fee rule was implemented immediately and was finalized, and the passport rule will be final on April the 10th. So that opens the door for DV27 to go ahead. DV27 is not affected by the pauses. I don't care what people say, it's not affected by the pauses. So it makes no freaking difference whether the pauses are in place or not. They can run DV27. The travel ban also doesn't change anything about DV27. It is not true to say that any of the banned or paused countries will not be eligible for DV27. There is no connection between DV27 and the pauses or the bans. So, there isn't, right? But what there was the need to finalize these rules and to make the system modifications necessary to track this data. Some of you don't understand those systems modifications took a long time, and I'm not very surprised by that. But now at least we've seen the law side of it catch up, right? So the approval is there for the lottery period to start at any time after April 10th. When will they announce it? I don't know. I suspect it might be early April, and maybe they start mid-April or towards the end of April. We'll have to wait and see, right? But that means that the normal announcement of the results obviously is going to be delayed. We already knew that. They already told us that would happen. So there will be a delay of the results. But I'm hoping that they'll go fast enough to actually still give a decent chance for some interviews to happen in October of this year. So we'll have to wait and see exactly how they achieve that. Okay. Someone from the north of England. Hey up, blood. Hey up, Daniel. Oh man, I work with a Yorkshireman, and he cracks me up every time he opens his mouth. But anyway, what is happening to 27? Any update about Mumbai embassy taking interview? No, I don't know anything about specific embassies, which is why I'm inventing that tool, or have invented that tool to try and track information. That's the only way we can get information, right? And it's the only way that we'll be able to sort of have that information centrally. By the way, in that tool, I'm happy to explain the architecture of that tool if people want, if they've got any concerns. There is one aspect of it is in that I'm collecting the email address, right? I need the email address because I need to be able to control your re-access, your access to the data, your own data, and update it. So I need that email address. I need to be able to send the magic link. You don't have to put a password in, but you do have to put in a real email address because you're only going to be able to access your data through your email address, right? However, that email address is not stored in the table that I use for the data representation. So I will be able to give API access or other sort of access to that data, and I'm showing it on the screen. So I'll discuss with Zarthisius the best way to do that once we're up and running. But I'll probably make the data available to Zarthisius, and he's so much better than me at his visualizations and so on. I'm just I'm an old guy with an AI tool. He will do a bit better job of those visualizations than I would, I'm sure. But I just wanted to sort of say the email address sits in a separate authentication table with the magic key value, which is a sort of a timing out period of time, and so that's off to one side. So there shouldn't be any real concerns. The data I'm asking for is it's anonymized. Your case number is anonymized, and so on. So and I haven't put any notes fields in there or anything else like that. So hopefully there's no opportunity for someone to put some crap in there. But we'll have to see. I don't know what people will do with it, right? So anyway, that tracker, the DV tracker, hopefully will give us the ability to really find out information, things like questions like this about Mumbai. Okay. Hello, Si. The case was filed. I think the judge will be sentenced. The judge is going to be sentenced until March. I think the judge will be down until March 28th. Can give injunction. What do you think? So I don't know. I don't really want to sort of overpromise. I think each of the lawyers has tried to sort of downplay the speed, and I agree with them. Downplayed the speed at which these things happen, because if you set an expectation that you file a lawsuit on March 15th, and by the end of March you're going to get an injunction, that's a wrong expectation to set. If it happens, wonderful. I'm not saying it can't happen, although actually the lawyers would probably say it can't happen. Maybe you could get a TRO that fast, but I don't think we'll be able to get an injunction that fast, because that does allow for a little bit of back and forth time. There's got to be some time for the government to respond, and then for our lawyers to respond to the government's response, right? There has to be that back and forth for an injunction, whereas in a TRO, the rules are a little bit different. So, and we're not going for a TRO, we're going for an injunction, and so there's got to be some back and forth communication. So how quickly that will be, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But I just want to urge you to be a little bit patient with the process, because it's going to feel like it'll take a long time. Okay. Your passport confusion runs out in August. Hopefully DV27 runs out before August. Yeah, hope so too. I mean, it would be extremely late if they pushed it to that late. A question that often comes up is, for a passport that is going to expire soon, is it still okay to use it on the day you enter? And I'm sure you know this confusion because you've listened, I'm sure. But it's absolutely fine to use a passport that will expire soon, as long as it's not expired on the day you enter the lottery, right? Even if it expires the very next day, that's not a problem, but it mustn't be expired on the day that you enter the lottery, okay? Hello, Britt. Can you use our passport buoyed data at embassy? For example, if I apply for a student visa, they see that I've tried DV lottery, so my intention is to stay there. So you're talking about immigrant intent, and up to now, the government have always said, and they've said multiple times, that immigrant intent is caused for DV lottery winners or DV lottery entries. It's caused at the point when you submit the DS-260. The DS-260 is an application for an immigrant visa, okay? And so when you apply for an immigrant visa, that's it. You've declared your intention, your desire to go and live in America permanently, right? However, entering the lottery doesn't make that same sort of determination. So the fact that yes, they will have all this data. The data is really valuable to them, and they will put that data together in ways that we can't even imagine. There are incredibly good tools now to combine data from different databases and so on. And I'm sure the government have figured out how to do all that for security background checking. So they're able to put our social media together with our passport information, together with birth and death information in various countries and so on. And this data they collect on the DV lottery adds to that data and allows them to cross-reference things. And so there must be very good data available to them from the tools that they have. But they should not be refusing someone a non-immigrant visa simply because you bought, you went and entered the lottery, right? It would be the same as you buying a lottery to win $1 million or whatever, and the tax man coming and saying, well, you've got to pay me the tax on the $1 million. And you say, well, I only bought a ticket. I didn't win. That wouldn't make any sense, right? This is the same thing. You can't have the negative impact from buying the ticket, if you see what I mean. You actually have to be a winner. And even then, you have to actually take the next step to actually fill in your DS-260. Okay, just being a winner, which you have no control over, that doesn't mean you've declared immigrant intent either. Okay. How will the embassy contact us if we didn't leave our passports and only received a 221G with no public charge issues? And how should we submit our passports afterwards? They will have to email you and contact you, and they'll ask you to forward that passport. Most of the embassies are now using these courier companies, to manage the employment inflow, and so probably it will be through that process. I don't know exactly; it'll vary by embassy. But the first thing is they'll email you. They'll, when the pause is lifted, they would email you and say, "Hey, we need your passport to be able to issue your visa. Please get it to our office this way." They'll give you instructions, in other words. You don't need to worry about it because they will give you instructions, okay? What do you think about the pause? When will they lift? You got 221G at your interview. Yeah, I don't know when. I hope the government look at these lawsuits, realize that they are not in a winnable position, and give up, right? I hope that would happen. But I'm the first to admit that's obviously a very happy path situation. That's not necessarily what's going to happen. We're probably going to have an argument, and then there's a couple of points in that argument when the government could choose to behave properly. So what will they do? I don't think the lawsuits will make any of that any worse, which is why I've recommended people consider the lawsuits if they have the ability to do that. But we'll have to wait and see about the timing. I can't understand how the bulletins will follow. I ask you, please, if you can give an explanation or prediction about the projection of up to what number cases can reach in South America. South America will probably go current, right? Quite simply, you're already at case number 3,000, and it'll probably go current. If I show you briefly how many cases there are, let's look at South America. There are 4 months left after this month now of visa bulletins, and the case number that is current is already up to 3,000. And as you can see, there is embassy activity all the way up to case number 3,000, right? The maximum, the highest case number is 4748 range, 4,800, not 48,000, 4,700. And so it wouldn't surprise me at all if they make that current in the next 4 months. Wouldn't surprise me. Now, I can't guarantee that. I don't know that for a fact, but it wouldn't surprise me if they went current in South America, right? It sometimes happens that way. Oceania is not likely to be quite so lucky. You can see that there is a bigger gap, right, between where they're actually at and the massive number of cases left. So, it's not quite the same for Oceania. And for EU, yeah, again, there's a lot of cases left, right? So there's, more risk for EU. And for, Asia is already current, right? And Africa has got a massive backlog, a massive sort of gap there between the current number, which is 55,000, which is about here, and and the maximum case number, which is about 105,000, right? There's a big gap. So I don't know how that's going to go in Africa. But look, let me just say something. You can do all the math calculation you want, and you still won't necessarily be accurate. And this is what I've had to learn with bitter experience, I have to tell you. In doing predictions, I can do all the math predictions as good as anyone else. I understand this thing as well as anybody else understands it, right? But that doesn't mean that I can predict accurately what the government are actually going to do, because you never really know what they're going to do in the background, right? So whilst many of you would like to think that you have, fantastic information and understanding and everything else, you can't predict this properly. If you think you're smarter than me, you're probably not. And if you think you know more about this, than I know, you probably don't. And if you notice, some of you think you can predict something that I say is unpredictable. Maybe you should learn from an older, wiser, person who. I mean, I shouldn't say nobody's smarter than me. I'm sure there's lots of people smarter than me. But in terms of your DV knowledge and your understanding of the data, you're not smarter than me, right? I know this data as well as anybody, and I know the process as well as anybody. This is one time where I'm going to use that phrase that Trump says. I know. There's no one who knows more about this than me. I think that's probably the case with DV Lottery. I don't think anybody knows more about DV Lottery than I know, apart from the people that actually work for the government on DV Lottery. And frankly, I think I know more than some of those people as well. But I also understand that the math will only get you so far. The predictions are always going to be flawed because we don't really know what the humans are going to decide. And the humans do some weird shit sometimes, right? So there was one year, I think it was 2018, where I predicted a final number, and mathematically I was 100% correct. Mathematically, I was correct. And we later came to know that I was correct by the data being released and what actually happened. And this was for Africa region. So I gave a number which I believed was absolutely going to be a safe number in the final visa bulletin, and they didn't go to that number, right? And so it disappointed people, and it was a slap in the face to me, because I had got over cocky, I got over confident, and I thought that I could be absolutely categorically predicting the numbers, because I had predicted the numbers through the year very, very well. And mathematically, I knew what they should be able to do in the last visa bulletin. But it doesn't mean that they're going to do what they should be able to do. They're sometimes going to do something different. And we make assumptions about what their motives are that we can't possibly know about. Like one of the things that people assume is, well, if they're going to get to 52,000 visas, or if they're going to get to 55,000 visas, they've got to do this. Yes, but they may not be trying to get to 52 or 55,000 visas. They don't give a damn. They're not told off for not issuing all the visas, right? So that's the sort of problem that we tend, our human little, brains tend to get ahead of us, and we assume that they want the same thing that we want, and they don't necessarily want the same thing that we want. They're not necessarily trying to achieve the same outcome that we assume that they must be trying to achieve, right? And obviously it's a very human thing to do. Our emotions get the better of us, but we forget that they are controlling the visa bulletin. It's not a totally sort of automatic thing, right? So let's see. All right. Hello, Britt. With the change of new Secretary of National Security, do you think it can influence something about the pause that governs the DV? I think you mean the new secretary who's going to be over DHS from the end of the month, right? So this is Senator Mullins. He's such an idiot. He's worse than I had originally understood. To see his confirmation hearing and to watch him go through that, I thought he would clean up some of the mess that he's done from before, but he's just a very, very stupid man. That's the problem. Now, Kristi Noem wasn't a very smart person either, but there is a problem with people that there's this principle of Dunning-Kruger. Some people are too stupid to know that they are stupid, and that's a problem. And that principle is described in a theory called Dunning-Kruger. And that's definitely the problem with the new guy Mullins. He is too dumb to know how dumb he is. That's really bad, because he thinks he's one of the smarter people in the room. So when he's being given advice from various people who probably know what they're doing, he will think he knows more than they do. Right? Trump is the king of Dunning-Kruger. He genuinely believes he is the smartest person, that he knows more about this and this and this than anybody else. He genuinely thinks that, right? He's too stupid to realize his limitations, and to realize that there are smarter people. I don't mind having smart, people in charge don't have to be the most intelligent people. Absolutely not. But they have to be smart enough to listen to other people who know better than them. And when you put an idiot in charge of such an important, position, if that person is overestimating their own abilities and is a fanatical follower of Trump, it's a bit of a dangerous combination. So I'm not sure we've got, I don't think we're much better off. Put it like this. And I've pointed out that Mullins is the least educated person in the whole of the Senate. So out of 100 senators, he is the least educated person. Now, education, I couldn't give two shits about education, in all honesty. But they are lawmakers. The senators are lawmakers. They're supposed to know something about how laws are constructed, how they're designed, what they're designed to do, and so on. Mullins has an associate's degree, a 2-year degree in construction. That's it. It's like, this is not the smartest cookie, and he's not that well educated either. So he's not only stupid, he's also uneducated. You can have a stupid person that has managed to achieve some education. I've known lots of people like that. Or you can have a very smart person who has got very little education. Education is not necessarily the key to everything, right? But when you have someone who is stupid and uneducated, and they think they're smarter than they are, that's probably a bad combination of things, right? And that's the situation we're getting into if he is confirmed. But his answers were just so bad. I think the judge can give an injunction. What do you think? I think they should. An injunction is given when the plaintiffs have proven their case, that harm is being done, that the decision was arbitrary and capricious, when it didn't follow things like the APA. There's going to be all of these arguments that Red Eagle and Impact are going to be making. They're going to make individual arguments saying they're going to prove certain things, and they won't win on everything. I mean, they call them causes of action, right? And so they're going to say, here's 10 things, or here's 6 things, or whatever number it is. Here are 10 allegations we're going to make of things that the government have done wrong. And the judge, I think, will then have to go through those and agree with those individually or disagree with those individually. But the lawsuit doesn't have to win on all of those things in order to win its outcome, right? And the injunction will be given if harm is being done. That's when an injunction is given, and there's a likelihood that the lawsuit would win in the end, right? And so the injunction is more properly called a preliminary injunction. It's a preliminary injunction because it's before the final case is decided, but in the meantime, we're going to stop the harm being done, right? That's basically what the injunction is about. And it will stop the government behaving in the way that is causing harm. Well, I believe we can prove now that harm is being done. That's why I'm showing you that data about the number of interviews taking place, because that's actually a stronger argument than saying, well, people are having to wait for their issuances. So what? A judge could say, so they're having to wait an extra 2 months. Who cares, right? Tell me something that's bad. A 2-month delay or a 3-month delay or a 6-month delay is not necessarily harm. But what is harmful is if you can show that less people are going to get visas than should have got visas because of something that is being done by the government. And that's what the 2NL information I was showing you, that's what that proves, right? So that's why that's important. And it's important I get that data to Curtis and team and to Jesse and Chuck and so on. So I will be doing that. And it's that data is developing, right? So it's a developing story. So I'm going to keep them appraised of that, or show them how to get that data. All right. So many big things happening right now. DV Lottery has been deemed hushed. DV Lottery matters. Impact hasn't filed yet. It's not in PACER database. I just checked. Interesting. So I think that I saw a confirmation via email that they filed, but yeah, I don't know whether that means it's really there. But thanks for checking, Denny, in the PACER database. Yeah, thank you. So I'm watching you from Nairobi, Kenya. Talk about requirements when doing application of green card. I mean, that's a very big question, right? So, but when you're doing the entry period, the most important thing I would say is in this process, it's important to tell the truth. So when you're doing any sort of immigration process, it's very important you tell the truth. In fact, people that lie in the immigration process are never ever going to be truly secure. Even if you tell a lie during your immigration process and you get your green card and then later you go for naturalization, but during naturalization or even later they find out that you lied at some point in that process in order to obtain the green card, they can take your citizenship away from you. That's what denaturalization is. So you cannot be in a situation where you've lied in this process. So when you enter the DV lottery, you have to tell the truth. Are you married? Then enter you're married. If you're married but your wife doesn't like you or something, and she won't let you take a photo of her for the entry, or your kids are not available for the photo or whatever, then tough luck. Don't enter the lottery, because you should not be entering without derivatives that you actually have. You shouldn't be including derivatives that you don't actually have as legal derivatives of yours. You should be listing your marital status correctly and behaving correctly, and so on. Your country of eligibility is important. All of those things are important things. Now, if you make a mistake on the education level that you've achieved, that doesn't matter at all. That doesn't matter at all, right? But what does matter is those other things I mentioned, mainly your marital status, your number of derivatives, that you have included all your derivatives, that your country of birth is correct. The country of birth thing can be, if you say you were born in Kenya, but you were actually born in Ghana, let's say, that isn't necessarily going to get you refused. But if you say you're born in Australia and you're actually born in Kenya, you're going to be refused, right? Unless you've got good reason to say you were born in Australia, or that you are chargeable to Australia. For example, in that case, you have to have married in Australia. So yeah, be careful. Be very careful to tell the truth. That's the biggest piece of advice I can give you. That's the most important thing. Okay. What about the immigration freeze? What will happen if DVs start? Well, so I don't think the immigration freeze will be in place for that long, personally. I think either the government would have taken it down anyway, but the lawsuits are probably going to take it down. Excuse me, let's get a coffee. So I don't think it's going to be in place when DV27 starts, but I could be wrong on that, right? And if it starts, then okay, we'll keep on attacking it, right? If DV27 starts on October 1st and the freezers are still on, then we'll have to continue to attack it. But I don't think the lawsuits will take that long, because they're mainly going to fight. The plaintiffs are DV26 plaintiffs, and so they're trying to attack that during the DV26 period of time. Okay. Bit of what feels like a catch-22 question. Live in the UK since birth. My passport expires in June. Will getting a new one affect the DV application? Not at all, Daniel. You'll be absolutely fine. So it's a very normal thing that people continue their lives during the process. People get married. People have babies. People's spouses or children sometimes sadly pass away. Life happens, right? And one of those things that happens in life is that your passport needs renewing, and you renew it, and that's fine. The fact that you don't have the passport that you entered with once we were in those days is not a problem. You do need to keep a copy of the old passport, though. I would say if you're going to enter the lottery, you need to scan or keep a copy of the passport, and that's part of the entry process. They want you to scan that now. They want to show that now. But if I were you, I would keep that record for yourself as well, right? Because you want to show that you did have a valid passport on the day that you entered the lottery, and that you've got the proof to support that. And that should be part of your information in their entry process anyway, but you should have the proof yourself. And then later, yeah, you can, you lose your passport or it expires or whatever, and so you need a new one. That's not a problem. That's just life happening, okay? Not a problem at all. I hope you're well and the family as well. Yes, they are. Thank you. Anything about the Johannesburg embassy? Same answer I gave earlier. That's why I've invented that DV tracker thing. Okay. What do you think? Will DV27 open in April or not? I hope so. We'll see. Let's see. Would I need to provide my adoption papers for the interview when travel ban and pause is lifted? I've got copies certified by UNHCR, but not the original documents. You will need to provide your birth certificate, yes. Will they accept the UNHCR versions? I don't know. Try and get your original birth certificates if you can, but at least the certification by UNCHR, if that's the only thing, HCR, if that's the only thing that you've got, then and you can't get the proper documents, okay, show what you have, but it obviously represents a risk, and I can't tell you for sure how that how your particular CEO in your particular circumstances will treat that problem. Okay, I can't always predict that. Okay. Yeah, stop spamming. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Let's see. I was handed green slip on 18th of December, interview in Nepal. But upon passport collection, the printed visa was cancelled without prejudice. What can be expected within 31st of October? Will it be lifted? Okay, so you had really unlucky timing, right? Because the pause was put on DV lottery by NOAM on the 19th of December, and then followed up by the Department of State on, I think, the 20th of December or thereabouts, and then confirmed in writing on the 23rd of December. So yeah, you got very unlucky. You went for your interview on the 18th, and while they printed your visa, and it sounds like they put it into the passport, and then before they sent it to you, the pause was implemented, which is why they've said cancelled without prejudice. Now that term, cancelled without prejudice, the without prejudice part of it, means that you did nothing wrong, and this won't affect you later, but that particular visa is cancelled without prejudice, without any negative impact. So they can reissue that visa for you later, and that's what will happen when the pause is lifted, or if the pause is lifted by September 30th, right? And it's September 30th, not 31st of October. So I expect them to reissue that, but you might need to talk to them to encourage them to do that. Okay, but I'm sure they'll take care of that for you. All right. Give us any info about the impact lawsuit if you have, if it's been filed or not yet. If yes, under what name? I don't have any information. Let's see. Let's see if there's any. They are defrauding the system and misusing consular fees. So this is a charge that we can level against them, right? I don't actually agree with it, to be honest. I don't think it's an accurate statement, but it is a statement that I know Curtis is going to make that statement. I mean, he's a bulldog, and I'm sure the impact team will do the same. They're asking people to pay for fees, etc. And if they're doing that with no hope of issuing the visas, then that would be a problem, right? It would be the wrong thing to be doing. It's not what we expect from the American government, right? So yeah, I mean, that's the argument they're going to make. I don't believe that's actually what they're doing. I think, like I've said all along, I think they believe, the government believe, that the pause is temporary. Otherwise, they would have behaved a different way. They would have just travel banned people. If they could have. I mean, I won't go into it, but the 212F, the travel ban ability, the ability of the president to shut down immigration from certain groups, that's a very powerful power that he has, right? So all these pauses, which were not announced by the president, they're not an executive order, they're not a proclamation. These pauses are less important, less powerful than the travel ban, right? So so why did they go down that path, right? Okay, so Uncle B is a master data analyst, not me, no. Hey, Uncle BS. I transferred my case, which was in stage 4, current for interview processing, to another post. You did well to transfer it. They don't normally transfer it at that point. Question, does it remain in that stage even when we've moved to another embassy or back in the queue? I don't know. What you achieved is actually quite rare. That when you're in stage 4, you actually have been added to a queue of people in AV status, called AV status internally within KCC. And that means that you're on a spreadsheet which is particular to that embassy, right? And so for you then to get moved to a different embassy means your name was taken out of one embassy's spreadsheet and into another, and that's actually quite hard to achieve. They don't normally sort of do that. Now, when they do that, you were probably added in behind everyone else, so you probably did lose some of your priority order. Because they don't sort of take people and put them to the top of the list in any of these spreadsheets. What they do is once a month they add people into those spreadsheets, the AV status, and as they're adding people into that spreadsheet, they add them in number order for that block of people that they're adding in now. But that means that the numbers sometimes of people that were added in previous months can be higher than lowercase numbers which are being added today, right? But within the ones that I'm adding today, those will be numbered and ordered within the range, right? For yours, it sounds like, if this is true, I don't know if it's true, but it sounds like they took your number out of the spreadsheet for whichever embassy you were at and allowed you to move it to another embassy. And then that would have been sort of just added to the end of that list, I would imagine. I'm just guessing that's probably what they did. But I don't think they'd have said, oh, he's about halfway through that list for Embassy A, so we'll put him halfway through the list for Embassy B. I don't think they did that, right? Okay. Confusion. I'm going to say, I'm just, I can't ignore that comment. I mean, I think you're right. I'm just being silly. Just be selection. Okay. So, good, but there's no question there. And if you do want to ask a question, please ask it in English. I appreciate it. I did learn French at school, but I'm not very good at French. Where do you think all the movements from the AF region are happening? I see cases up to 55K. That's de facto not AF embassies. As an AF 44 Mumbai, I'm waiting patiently. There's not very much activity in any embassies at case number AF 44K, right? The whole region is heavily backlogged, and as I showed the numbers earlier, they're not scheduling as many cases as they really should be scheduling. So I can't tell you though where Mumbai is at. Okay, if we apply for DV lottery but we're traveling when selected, do we need to return home for the interview, or we can complete it abroad? You can complete the embassy interview in whichever embassy you live closest to. Like, you don't have to go back to your home embassy. There is an option for you to say, hey, I'm traveling, I don't know where I'm going to be at this time, and so therefore please schedule me at my home country. That option is possible. But generally speaking, if you know you're going to be in this other country for the next year, you're going to give that country's address as the place where you live now, and that's where they will schedule you. You don't have to go back home for that. Okay? It took 21 minutes for Uncle B to start ranting. I haven't ranted yet. I haven't ranted. Hey Joe, how you doing? Just want to express my words of gratitude once again for answering the question about biometrics page at your forum. Take care. Thank you, Joe. This was a question about some of the, I think we are going to get into the biometrics stuff a little bit later. There's going to be more questions, and also about name formats and that sort of thing. I do have a names guide on my blog. I think it's like if you Google the words Brit Simon name confusion, there is a blog article about that. If any of you are unsure about names, but when we see DV 2027 instructions printed, I hope they give some clarity that will let us navigate all the different types of passports there are in the world, right? I've got a couple of different passports in my drawer over here, which will help to an extent, but I don't know all the passport formats for all the countries in the world. And some will have biometric information on this page, and then maybe a signature, will be on a different page, and so on. So we have to try and figure out what photo would satisfy the rules, and I'm hoping we'll have good instructions about that later on. Joe, obviously your question was a slightly different question about names, but anyway, just sort of made me think about that. All right. Do you think that this year we're going to have 2 times the DV programs? I do think that, yeah. It is possible. So they're going to be running the DV lottery draw process for DV27 very late, right? And that might actually work out okay. Maybe they sort of say, hey, why do we have to still do this thing in October and then release the results in May? We would rather do it in January or February and then release the results still in May or whatever. They're going to have to go much faster in this process than they normally could go. And that is easier today than it was, let's say, 5 years ago, because I think it was only in 22 or 23, maybe it was 22, when they went fully automated on the photos. That was the biggest thing. At some point, they introduced machine learning and AI tools to sort through the photos and to sort of find the ones that needed to be verified. But there was a period of time when they were doing this by humans only. Then they started doing the photo verification by AI, let's call it AI for simplicity, AI plus human verification. And then at some point they switched to totally AI, right? And yes, I do know that AI didn't exist, but just go with it, right? Maybe I should be saying ML if it was in 21 or 22 or whatever. But anyway, the technology is now doing the whole job, right? And because the technology is doing that whole job, they should be able to do that faster than when it was human assisted or totally human. And therefore, they should be able to condense that time period between the entry period and the results. There is an impact of that, and I've explained that impact before with regard to the CSPA, and I don't know how they're going to resolve that. But so it's a long-winded way of saying to you, look, my expectation is that they should run DV27 and then DV28 both in this year of 2026. However, it wouldn't be a total shock to me if they run DV27 and then they delay DV28 as well and put that into early part of next year or something. It wouldn't be a total shock. But we'll see. We'll see how that handle it. Okay. Let's see. What do you really think? DV26 winners will get the visa or not? Like what percentage? I'm pretty optimistic about it. I mean, if I had to, people always ask me, what's the chance of this? What's the chance of that? And I hate that question. I hate trying to give a percentage chance for something that is often 0 and 1. Right? You either get your visa or not. People ask me, what's the percentage chance of me getting my visa? And I'm like, it's either 0% or it's 100%. I'm not going to tell you a number in between because that's just nonsense. But I understand why people push for that. But if I had to put, having said that, if I had to put a percentage chance towards how likely it is that the pause stays in place until the end of September, and that no visas get issued, I would put that as a tiny possibility. And I would have put that as a very, very, very small possibility even before the lawsuits. I don't think that was ever going to happen. I think, I think the pauses will be removed at some point, particularly the DV lottery pause. That's specifically, unfair when there's a time, when it's got a date on it, right? So I think that probably would have come down anyway. But now with the lawsuits as well, I think it's very, very unlikely that I don't think a court is going to let the government get away with it, frankly. I think the arguments, I'm not saying that it's easy to make these arguments, but the arguments, I'm saying it's pretty easy to make these arguments. They are easy arguments to make that that the government has been arbitrary and capricious. And when we ask for the administrative record, and there isn't going to be one, which means that they didn't use any sort of logical deliberation or debate or any sort of reasoning process to just make up this pause, other than it came out of thin air. When they do that, and when we've proved the harm, and when we've proved that they didn't follow the APA and so on, I think there's lots of ways that the pauses can be taken down by the lawsuits, for sure. So I'm very optimistic that we will have some people issued. What percentage of cases get issued as opposed to not issued, I don't know. And as I've pointed out earlier in this video, there are less interviews being scheduled now than there should be by far in Africa, right? And as we go by each month, that harm, that damage has a cumulative effect. And it means now that, we've got no way of hitting the quotas for Africa. That chance is gone. Chance is gone now because of the travel ban in Africa and Asia, that those quotas can be hit. But it's doubly affected by the lack of scheduling in Africa. It's just, forget it. We can't hit the quotas, which means that we're going to have an underfilled year for sure. Doesn't matter what they do now in the last few months. The damage has been done, and I think that we will see a low 2NL month for this month as well in Africa, and that's just like the nails in the coffin going in, right? This is just like, the damage is definitely being done. That time is being wasted, and it can't be reclaimed. Okay. Do you know if Impact is still filing the case today, or they moved the date again today? I saw a Suskind. What is it? Suskind. I can't remember his name. Oh man. The horrible thing about getting old is you forget things really easily. Greg, what's Greg? Greg Suskind, and I can't remember. So I saw the law firm actually responded saying that they had filed this morning, but someone did mention, Denny mentioned earlier that that they checked PACER, which is the place that would normally show when a lawsuit has been filed, and it's electronic, so I think it's immediate. So I don't know, I'm not quite sure, why the confusion there, but it's okay. If it's not today, it'll be Monday or Tuesday or whatever. It's fine. It's okay. All right. Hello, sir. DV24 winner, but didn't get the interview. Can I apply for B1, B2 tourist visa? Yeah, you can. Just don't be surprised if you filed the DS260 for your DV24 win. That might be a concern that comes up in your B1, B2 visa interview. They might ask you, about your intention to live in America. They have that information. They will have that. So be honest about it when you're asked that question. And just, what you'll have to do is you have to show that you are planning to return to your home country at the end of your visa validity period. That's very important. Okay. Let's see. Oh, next question. Oh, you said you've already been refused. Do I think it's because of the lottery? Well, it could be. It could be partially because of that, but it's, you may have been refused anyway, right? They always, there's a lot of people who are refused non-immigrant visas. A lot of people are refused, and the highest number of people are refused when the consular officer believes that person won't play by the rules, and that they will try and overstay their visa, or that person has an intention to stay. And so you have to be very careful to prove that you have something to go back for your home country, that you've kept your job, that you have a house there, that you've got family there, that you're leaving money in a bank there, that you're not selling your car, and so on, right? You have to prove all these things and show that you're maintaining ties to your home country. That's important to show. And if you don't show it, and you had applied for an immigrant visa through DV lottery, then yeah, that's just one more clue that they have that you may not return to your country after your visa expires. Okay. What's the situation about family reunification? I don't talk about any other visa types apart from DV lottery. I don't know anything about those other types, right? Does it matter when you apply once it's open, of course? No, it doesn't matter when you apply. Um, the draw process is random. It doesn't matter what level of education you are. It doesn't matter whether you're married or single, if you've got 17 kids or no kids. None of those things matter. And it also doesn't matter what time of the day you apply or what of the week you apply, or whether you apply at the beginning of the lottery opening period or at the end of the lottery opening period or sometime in between. It makes no difference. There was one year, DV 2012, when it did make a difference. And in that year, the whole lottery results were cancelled because they realized that they had messed up the system. I nearly used a different word. That they messed up the system and they only selected winners from the first few days. Actually, that happened, I think, twice. There was a suspicion that it happened in DV26. There is someone I know who I've always agreed I wouldn't share very much information about this particular organization, shall we say, but they're an organization that has a number of entries that they put through into the system. And they were able to track that 2 certain days or 2 certain time periods within the whole month of entries, they didn't get any winners from those batches, whereas they got winners from every other batch, right? Now, I've since then looked at the data. We can see the entry days. We don't know what time of day people enter from the data, but we see the day they entered the lottery, and it looks normal to me. So I don't quite know what went on with their particular entry process, but the lottery draw looks like it was operated normally in DV26, in my opinion. And what you see is you do see more winners from the beginning and from the ends of the process, but that's simply human nature. And I've traced that against server activity. And what I've shown in the past is that there is more people going and entering at the beginning of the lottery period and at the end of the lottery period. And therefore, the curve we see, which it looks like a sort of a bowl, the curve shows most winners from the beginning, and then it sort of goes like that in a sort of a bowl shape. There's fewer winners from the middle of the lottery period, and there's more winners from the end of the lottery period. So the beginning and the end of the first few days, first 2 or 3 days, and the last 2 or 3 days have the most winners. But that's because there's also a correlation, an exact correlation to the server activity that shows the servers are busier at the beginning and the end of the periods. So more people are entering on those periods means more people being selected from those periods. In other words, it's truly random. It doesn't matter what day of the week or when in the period you enter at all. It doesn't matter at all. And I would say don't enter towards the end personally, because you never know if you're going to run out of time, if you're going to, lose internet access or something like that. Enter, soon. Don't leave it to the last couple of days. Greetings from Egypt. Do you think it could take more than W months to process DS260, even if it is AF 2800, because I'm worried about receiving 2NL before the last bulletin? If you haven't submitted your DS260 by now, yes, you're starting to cause a risk. In years previous to this administration, I've always said you could submit your DS260 as late as May. And then last year, things started to go wrong, and we started to see people running out of time when they submitted that late. And so I don't recommend anyone submits later than the end of March. So you've got to submit now. It doesn't mean that you can't be processed if you submit in April, but you're certainly increasing your risk. And so, yeah, I wouldn't leave it later than now, frankly. I would be submitting the DS260, whatever your reasons were or are for not submitting earlier, right? If they are to announce the DV27 in April, even if it might not be directly affected DV26, it will definitely make the lawsuit stronger to deal with. Is my perspective correct in your opinion? No. It's got nothing to do with it. Is there a different way of answering that? Let me take some coffee and I'll think about it. No, still not correct thinking. Your perspective is not correct. It doesn't make the case stronger. You can't say, I mean, Curtis is going to have a cause of action about DV27. He is going to do that, right? But just because they're running DV27 does not in any way mean that the government are therefore more forced to operate DV26 correctly, right? No, there isn't that connection. That's really what you're saying, and that's no, just no. That's not really a logical thing. I don't know how you got to that, to be honest, but no, it isn't. It isn't a logical thing. By all means, if you want to try and have that argument, feel free to write your point down at BritSimonSays.com, and we can go back and forth about that. But I can't even imagine what made you think that connection was there. It's just not there. How will they assess our social network? Can it cause to a rejection in the interview? Yes, you should be careful. If you listen to Secretary Rubio, talking these days, he's made many speeches recently talking about the justification they use for taking away people's non-immigrant visas from students and that sort of thing. And the way he says it is this, and to me, it's a horrific abuse of their power to do that, right? So what they've done is they've had students having some sort of rally, and international students as well have some sort of rally, and those students are critical of the government policy or critical of Israel, as a government or whatever, and the position in Gaza or whatever, right? And so Secretary Rubio has then tried to take away and has taken away visas from people and removed them from the country, etc., because they were here on a visa and then said those things that upset the government. Number one, the government can F right off. They can, we have freedom of speech in this country, and we all have the freedom to say and think what we want, including visitors. That freedom extends to visitors as well. And if you understand the rules about freedom of speech, the government can't be doing stuff because the government is mad at you for criticizing them. I can say all I like. I can say every day of the week that Trump's a moron, right? And he is. I mean, he demonstrably is. But that's not the point. I can say it as much as I like. I can think that. I can say it, and there's nothing the government can do about that. They certainly can't seek to denaturalize me, because that's what I've said today when I went through my immigration process, years ago, right? Now, Rubio would disagree with that, I think. He would say, well, if we'd have known that those students were going to be anti-America or anti-Israel, and Israel being our allies, I don't understand how that works, but if we'd have known they were going to be, anti-America, let's just call it anti-America, then we wouldn't have given them the visa in the first place, right? And so he believes he's got the right to take away the visa from someone that's already in the country. And he makes the point that they certainly wouldn't have given the visa had they have known that. Well, okay, that's a more reasonable point. If they look at your social media history and they figure out that you've been chanting death to America and all this sort of stuff, or supporting people that say death to America, then that is, you're likely to get refused, and you probably should be refused. If even before coming to America, you're already pissed off at America, you probably shouldn't be coming here, right? Now, that's not the same thing as coming here for all the right reasons, not being politically upset with America or whatever else, and then later, while you're here, then developing a conscience about what America is doing on our behalf as Americans and as residents and even visitors to America, right? That's not the same thing. But so I agree with Rubio when it comes to, do you give a visa or not at the beginning? But I don't agree with him when it comes to how we treat visitors and permanent residents and citizens of this country when they're here, okay? Your mileage may vary. Any news about the legal proceedings? No, not really. It was a bit of an odd conversation this morning. So I've explained to people in the past that Curtis Morrison and Red Eagle Law are very transparent in their data, and and that transparency is a bit of a double-edged sword sometimes. And sometimes Curtis will say things that maybe he doesn't want to get public, right? But when you're talking to a group of 600 or 700 people, that information that you say to those people will sometimes leak out, right? And it's just obvious it's going to leak out. Now, if I see that information coming across my desk, as it were, in channels that I administer, where I'm an admin or whatever, or on my blog or whatever else, it's not my responsibility to police the data or the information that Curtis didn't want to come out. I can't figure out whether he did or didn't want that information to come out, and I'm not even going to try, right? I'm not going to police that. I'm not the policeman of that sort of information. As far as I'm concerned, if Curtis puts that information out in public and that public then disseminate that information, then that's Curtis's decision that he made it public. And Curtis has always been very, very bold about that, about the transparency of information. I love him for it. I think it's great, right? But live by the sword, die by the sword. So he wants to be transparent, and sometimes that means that more information will then come out than perhaps Curtis is comfortable with. But Curtis is a big boy, and he can figure that out for himself. And I did point out this morning, funnily enough, that if you Google the words Curtis Morrison and McConnell, you'll find 2013 articles where, before Curtis became a lawyer, he was a journalist, and he secretly recorded a conversation that McConnell, a politician, had. And the conversation happened behind closed doors, quite literally behind closed doors, but there was an air vent or something. And so Curtis was able to sort of stand by the air vent and record this conversation, using the principle that if that conversation happens in public, then anybody can hear it, and and therefore that's your problem, right? And I just love that Curtis now still, I believe, lives his life that same way. He was arrested and fought that battle then in 2013, fighting for the transparency of information. And all these years later, now he's become a lawyer and so on. He still behaves that same way. I love that about Curtis. I think it's brilliant. I think it's great. So, but I just think it's a very funny connection. Now, Impact tend to be a little bit different to that. They're not quite so transparent in the information they share. They're a little bit more cautious. And there have been some cases where Curtis has been deliberately told by judges and so on, he's been instructed not to share some information. And he's kept that information private, and he's respected the judges' opinions on and orders on that. But other than that, it's up to Curtis what information he shares, and I'll share whatever I hear, right? Because it's out in the public, right? But I don't have any specific news. We're not going to get news every day of the week, and Curtis is pretty good at spreading his own information, right? So I'm sure you'll hear about it from him. Okay. Uneducated and stupid, the combo is a disaster. Yeah, exactly. Cairo Embassy is the best performer. They issued over 1,000 visas in 3 months, and half before the pause went into effect. So I think the pause is lifted. They might reach the 7% cap earlier than last year. Very unlikely. Very unlikely that they're not scheduling as many cases as they would normally schedule. And, we've lost ground already. So yeah, Cairo it can be a good performer, but they're not scheduling at the pace that they should be scheduling. So no, I don't think they're going to hit the cap. I mean, even Cairo as a powerhouse, I don't think they'll hit the cap personally. But we'll see. Hello, Simon. Kindly address this issue. If a group of people apply DB from the same computer, same IP address, could this be translated as fraud? It's one of the tools that they use, yes. It's not necessarily a bad thing. They do know that there are sometimes agencies that that agency may submit several hundred cases. In general, and they've had that ability to block those IP addresses and see those IP addresses. They've had that ability for years. I do it at my blog. I know when you write a message to me at my at my blog, I see your IP address, right? It shouldn't be a surprise. That's a very common thing in internet world, right? And so, and the government have got the same thing. So yeah, they have your IP address when you're applying and you do multiple entries. Now, if you're doing that for a family, you've got 10, 20 entries or whatever people within your family, no big deal. If you're putting in 1,000 entries because you're, registering people more or less as a business, yeah, you should probably be a little bit smarter about how you, move that IP address, how you change your IP address to batch up those cases, right? But I think most people doing that sort of work understand that if they've got any brains at all, right? Let's say we're in July, August bulletin. My SA case number goes current. If the pause isn't lifted by that time, is it worth to attend the interview? Getting from 221G to a visa doesn't seem fast. I hope it'll be fast. This has never happened before, right? We haven't had this type of pause, so I can't give definitive answers on exactly what will happen once they drop the pause and how fast they'll issue the 221G cases by that time. I think there will be some sort of hassle, some sort of, I don't know, bureaucratic slowness, shall we say. It might take, I don't think it'll be like, the pause is lifted one day and the very next day everybody gets their visa. I don't think it'll be like the very next day. I think it might happen. It might need a couple of weeks to go through. But I personally, in that position, let's say you were interviewing in August or whatever, and the pause still wasn't down for whatever reason, I would rather be in a position where I had interviewed and all I needed was the pause to be lifted to get issued. I'd rather be in that position than to try and not attend the interview to save the money or whatever, and then try and schedule the interview when everybody else is trying to schedule the interview. I wouldn't want to be in that latter position, in my opinion. But it does depend how much the money means to you, right? How big an impact would it be if you've paid all this money for the fees, for the medicals, for the interview fees and everything else, and then you don't get the visa? How big a deal is that? In Africa, let's say you've got a small family, 4 or 5 people, and you're in Africa where the GDP of some of these African countries is like $3,000 or $4,000 a year, and we're talking about $2,000 for the cost of, let's say, a family going through this process. That's a big deal, right? If somebody told me I was potentially risking, let's say, 6 months of my income on getting a visa, that would be a different conversation to me than if I'm risking, a morning's worth of income, right? Which is what that situation means to me. If it's $1,000 or $2,000, I earn that in a day, right? So it's not such a big deal. But if that's 6 months of income, then I'm going to have a very different thought process about that. So you have to sort of weigh that up for yourself. Okay. Hi, Britt. Kindly to us when you think the results for this year's lottery will be out, since the time for applying is close, other than previous years. Yeah, it'll be different. I just don't know when it'll be. I don't know what time period they'll set between the entry period and the announcement of the results. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I'm sorry. Casablanca consulate is so frustrating. Scared that I might not have the interview. I went to the consulate to see if I can talk to a staff to assure me of the interview, and I was told there'll be interviews. Okay, well, yeah, it is very frustrating, King Greg. It is frustrating. I don't know what else I could say about that. I can't give you a word of comfort or anything. I do know that in Curtis's live, somebody asked if they could have a consultation with him for a group lawsuit of just Moroccans, I believe. It might be worth reaching out to Curtis to see if that actually happened. You could probably ask him in the channels, in the Telegram channels, if that happened, and make sure you're involved in that if you want to be involved in that. But I think Curtis's answer to that was no, we're not going to take it on. He's tried to sue individual embassies before, and so has the Impact team, so has Jesse Bless. There's been several lawsuits against individual embassies, and those tend to not work. It just doesn't work very well. If only some countries resume DV visas, will applicants from the 75 paused countries lose their chance because of the yearly cap? Well, the yearly cap. So you're saying, could non-paused countries, let's say the DV pause is removed, but the 75 country pause stayed in place, are there enough entries and people from the non-75 countries to take all of the visas? Very unlikely. Very, very unlikely is my answer to that. Extremely unlikely. Even if the DV pause were removed tomorrow, let's say, and the 75 country pause stayed in place, even if that happened, there's not enough time for them to repair the damage and to get to the caps globally. There's not enough time now. They've screwed it up. It's gone. The damage has been done. So no, I don't think that will happen at all. Hi, Simon. I wanted to ask, do we know when DV Lottery is going to go live again? We're hoping April, but we'll see. Also, I was born in Greece, but my Greek passport is going to expire in November 26th. But I also have a Cypriot passport. Use the one that you think is most sensible. You could use either passport in the entry process, and you can use either passport in the DV lottery process. But assuming you're going to renew your Greek passport and you're Greek, you would probably use that, right? That's probably the one that you would use, but it's up to you. As long as that passport that you use is active on the day that you enter the lottery, that it's hasn't expired on the day you enter the lottery. That's the important thing. Okay. Case number 59.9K in Africa received to an interview on April 19. Dar es Salaam, DRS, I think it's Dar es Salaam Embassy. Interesting, thank you. That's the sort of information I want to be in that DV tracker, right? Do you think the judge will prioritize plaintiff about interview scheduling and visa printing? He can just say that the pause was unlawful and is lifted. Then what's happened? Plaintiff's hose didn't get to NL. Okay, so the technical answer for this relates to what the judge can do. The judge can only grant relief to people who are in front of him. They're either in front of him because they're plaintiffs to a group lawsuit, or because that lawsuit or a lawsuit has asked to represent a case of people, a class of people that are in a certain position. So, for example, in DV 2020, one of the lawsuits had 7 or 11 named plaintiffs. I keep forgetting the number. I keep reminding myself to go look up that number, but it's 7 or 11. I can't remember which. But it had a small number of named plaintiffs who were representative of everybody else. And that was in the Gomez lawsuit. And Jesse Bless represented that class. And in the end, Judge Mehta approved that class as a group of people who were not represented by any other lawsuit, but were DV lottery winners, right? And so the order in DV 2020 affected everybody, whether they were plaintiffs or not, right? Now, these days, the rules about classes has got a little bit more complicated, and neither of the lawsuits are going for a class. They're not trying to establish a class action. And so the judge will only be able to make an order that affects the people who are plaintiffs. However, the government can choose to react how they want to react. They may take down the pause for everybody because they were told for these, let's say, 2,000 people are on the lawsuits. They might say, well, we can't do something special for these 2,000, so instead we're going to take down all the pauses for everybody. In that case, there may be a prioritization from the court's perspective for those people, but the government may say, actually, everybody gets a fair chance here, whether they're a plaintiff or not. The difference will be that in the court case, the government will have to provide reports saying how many of the plaintiffs they have scheduled for interview, how many have been approved, how many have been issued, and so on, right? They'll have to provide data, and that data is kind of they don't want that data to make them look bad. They want that data to show that they are operating in good faith, and so that's why they will try and make progress on the plaintiffs. But we'll have to wait and see how it plays out. It's impossible to sort of really know exactly what's going to happen next, right? There are scenarios where only plaintiffs get some relief. There are scenarios where non-plaintiffs get some relief, and there's every mix in between, right? There's all sorts of other things as well, and also some scenarios where everybody's screwed, right? So there's everything. Anything can happen, right? Okay. Let's see. Just see if there's going to be any other interesting questions. A little question of thanks there, or a comment of thanks. You're very welcome, Jonas. Thank you for thanking. If this is a good question, if the pause is lifted after 6 months, will DV26 winners who were already interviewed redo their medicals? Yes, probably. When the visas are issued, they're given an expiry date, and that date is calculated as 6 months after the medical date, not the interview date. And so, or the approval date or anything else. It's the medical that sets that date. So if you've been waiting 5.5 months after your medical, and then you get your visa, and your visa comes through with a 2-week validity period, you can either say, oh, no problem, I'm going to get to America tomorrow morning, right? Possible, but unlikely. Or you can say, actually, I need a longer validity period, therefore I'm going to retake my medical. And you would communicate that to the embassy. You would arrange that with the embassy. And so, depending on how long this has all been going, and they know that, the embassies know that, they understand that problem. So depending on how long this has all been going, if you were one of those people that were interviewed, let's say in mid-December, and you were waiting for an answer, or late December or something, it might be quite a long time. You might have done your medical in late November, or something like that. So yes, you might have to repeat your medical once the visas can be issued, right? So it'll be a conversation between you and the embassy, and it's a complication, and that's one of the reasons I think they're going to try and remove the pause, but because it's a big hassle for everyone. They don't want to go through that hassle, but we'll have to see how it goes, right? This looks like an interesting question. Let's read this one. Let's say embassy capacity in the EU is 1,000 cases per month. It's a bit more than that. It's increased compared to last year because Ankara are doing more work, right? So they did 1,322 2NLs, or the interviews. They've just did that last month. This month so far for EU, they're at 670. But I don't know if they've finished all of the scheduling yet. They may still be scheduling cases, right? How the government decides to increase the VB number. Do they know capacity before publishing the VB? Do they see how many cases completed DS260? Yeah, they do. So, and they increase the number based on that, or they just go for a rough estimate, knowing the number of cases in the range they want to reach. They know how many, it's the first thing. They know roughly the capacity in the system, not by specific embassy, but as a sort of a rough estimate for the system, right? So they know that they need to reveal about 1,000 cases. Then they know that the number of DS260s is, whatever percentage, 75% of the cases have submitted their DS260s. And, mostly 90% of those cases have been processed already. They know those things, right? So they know how many case numbers they have to reveal, or they also know the holes. They know roughly how many case numbers they have to reveal in order to reveal enough new cases to use that capacity. They also know what backlog they have. So if there were, let's say, as you're using in your example, let's say there were 1,000, they know that when they release that 1,000 interviews, 100 of those cases are going to come from backlog, right? So, and what's backlog? Well, backlog is cases that were already current from the previous month, but not yet scheduled, probably because the DS260s weren't processed the previous month, or because the capacity of the embassies wasn't completely there last month, right? And that's exactly what just happened this month. They didn't increase the EU number at all, but they've been able to find 670 new cases that either now have their DS260 processed, or the capacity is now there for those cases at the embassy, whereas it wasn't last month. So the case numbers didn't increase at all, but they found 670 new cases, right? So so that's backlog in effect, that playing through there, right? And the DS260 penetration rate, the number of cases that have been processed, that's growing throughout the year, and it continues to grow right up until the final month or so. And so that's why we see the charts look like they look, where you see more and more, a higher and higher percentage in some number ranges, earlier number ranges typically increase. And it's because more and more cases are now have their DS260 processed, and there is capacity at those embassies. Okay. Will they issue more visas in DV27 if DV26 doesn't meet the full quota? I'm guessing the rationale for the figures is because they use the numbers for the net immigration figures. No, that won't happen at all. It's not legal. When they get to the end of the year on DV lottery, September 30th, those visas are gone. They can't be recovered, and they can't be transferred to the next year. It's gone. Okay, so no, they won't do that. And quite frankly, you know, DV27, I think they're going to under-select DV27, because if they over-select again, if they select 130,000 people again, that's a lot more DS260 processing work they have to put through the system than is truly necessary. So I don't think they'll do that. Just wondering what's going on with the UK. What's the chance it will be eligible for later years? Slavic, it's like you haven't been paying attention. I published a video I thought was quite an interesting video this week that shows exactly the answer to that question. It shows the way that that decision is made. There's a rolling 5-year window of how many immigrant visas in 3 particular cases are given out to each country. And I published that data this week. I did a video on it, and I showed what the position is for the UK and for several other countries. And the UK looks like it's coming back in. I think it would be unlikely. We don't have the DV24 data yet. It hasn't been published, so we don't know 100% certain. They're very, very late in publishing that number, but I think it's unlikely that the UK will have jumped high enough in the DV24 numbers to make them ineligible for DV27. So I think they will remain eligible for DV27. I think they will also remain eligible for at least DV28 and 29, maybe DV30. This period of time where Trump is reducing immigration in general and pausing countries and that sort of thing, that is going to have an impact in other visa classes other than DV lottery as well. And so that's going to produce a lower number. And so we could start to see some countries come back in. And I was shocked when I looked at the data, but Pakistan it's not a ridiculous thing to imagine Pakistan coming back in next either in DV27 or DV28. It could happen. Bangladesh maybe, although that seems frankly amazing. Canada is another one. Canada, it's like they're on the borderline. Now that will take more of a dip in numbers than I truly expect for Canada to come back in, but it's technically possible. So yeah, there are a few countries that are around about there. So have a look at that video. I just published the video the other day. I showed all the data, and you're asking the question. Thank you for dedicating your time to helping others. You're amazing as always. Thank you, Yessa. Appreciate that, man. How are you? Hope fine. Can we still use the same photo we took last year for DV27 that was not opened, or we need to get a new copy? You will need to probably get a new copy. The photo should be less than 6 months old at the time that you enter the lottery. Okay, so be very careful. When you use my photo tool, DV photo tool, which is down for maintenance, by the way. That should come back up, I think, in the next 2 days, 3 days. But when you use that, we stamp it the day you create that photo. There's a creation date, even though the photo you've given us might already be old. We create it as a new photo on that day. And so that you've got 6 months from when you created that photo through our site. But if you've got some other way that you've produced this photo, it could be old already. And be very careful. It's not something I've seen. I haven't seen cases. I haven't seen evidence, I should say, that cases with photos older than 6 months, like 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, are rejected. In fact, I've seen evidence to the contrary, where people have used older photos and have not been rejected in the initial process. But nevertheless, they could implement that at any time. And so I don't recommend you using an old photo. For the sake of $5 or whatever it is, just get a new photo, right? It's just not worth risking. Quite right, Confusion. Thank you for the accurate answer there. Did you hear about the Atlanta office opening and the condition of holdings on US CIS cases? This was overstated. I think many of you took this from Curtis's posts, and I think you've probably sort of overestimated the impact. This was announced in December of last year. I think it was established on December 5th, and they said they're opening this new Atlanta office to do some processing. But that office isn't operational yet, and so they're not pausing things because of that office. That's not the reason we're undergoing a pause or whatever. So it's unrelated, and we don't know how long that office will take to set up, to staff, and so on. We just know that it's an office that's going to be using newer technology to do more sort of screening. Not a big surprise that they have that sort of capability, or they're developing that sort of capability. I would be if I were them. I mean, it takes so much less time now to develop. That application I built the other day, that would probably normally be a few days' work, maybe a week's work or something, even though I'm hosting it myself on my own silly little site. And, but it took an amazingly short time to develop that whole thing. It's just, development is going to be much, much faster from now on, using new AI tools. And so, things like setting up a new center, which is able to amalgamate information from various databases and cross-check information against this database and that database and this database and this information. I'm not at all surprised they're setting that capability up, and that should be a new office. But even at the speed that they're able to work these days, it's not going to be set up overnight, right? So they're not waiting for that. Why does Fiji have such a high rate of selection? That is true, actually. They have a high rate of entry. You can look at the data from year to year to year, and you can prove categorically that the countries that have a high number of selectees is correlated exactly with their higher rate of entry. It's just that. You get more people from a country who enter, you'll get more winners from that country. It's as simple as that. So country A has 100,000 entries, and country B has 10,000 entries. There's going to be roughly a 10-to-1 ratio of winners from those two countries, from one country to the other, right? Now, if that country has 10 times the entries, but twice the fraud, then it won't be a 10-to-1 ratio. It'll be more like a 5-to-1 ratio, because the fraud does factor into this a little bit as well. But when you're talking about Fiji, that's not really a concern as far as I'm aware. And so, yeah, you'll see, if you compare Fiji with Australia or New Zealand, you'll see a correlation in the number of selectees they get with the number of entries that were put in. You can see that year to year. The data is published. They're behind on that data. They haven't published the 22, 23, and 24 figures as they should have done. But nevertheless, you can see older data, and you can work out the correlation. Okay. DV26 case number AF153. I haven't received 2NL yet. Interviews and notice are currently around 9.1K. Am I likely to be scheduled before September 30th? Right. It's a good question. and I don't know the exact answer, but I'm guessing that let me assume that the 9.1K is accurate, and it includes this month that's just happened, right? Um, let's hope that's true. You'd have to know how many cases per thousand that embassy is getting, and how much their capacity is on a month-to-month basis. And those are two numbers I don't have. So I can look at previous years and figure that out, but I can't tell you precisely for this year. And so the only thing you can do is say, okay, they moved from, and I'm just making this up, let's say you can see that they moved from 7.0K to 9.1K, so they moved 2.1K's worth. Then you could sort of roll forward and say, okay, if they can do 2.1K's worth in 1 month, in the remaining 4 months, they should be able to do about 8K's worth or 8.4K's worth, right? And therefore, they should get from 9.1K to 17.5K. You could do that sort of approximate math, but you would need to know what it was last month. And I'm just making it up that it was 7.0. I don't know what it was. If it was actually 8, let's say, or 8, for round numbers, let's say it was 8.1, and there are 4 months left, then it's probably only going to move from 4,000 up from now. In other words, it would be about 13.5, 14,000 at most, in which case you're in trouble, right? But you can do that math if you know what it was last month. And this is kind of why that tracker that I showed earlier is going to be important, because it will allow us to sort of make a little bit better a determination on questions like that. Okay. Hey Simon, I'm moving to Kenya for work, and I have the passport for one of the PAWS country. Please advise. The PAWS will travel with you, right? So you'll still be on PAWS if the country is paused, but you go and interview in a non-paused country. Let's ignore the DV pause for a minute. It doesn't mean you're not paused, right? So don't think you can move and get around the pause. The pause is by your country, not by where you interview. Okay. Let's see. Churchill, let me answer this question. It's like my first question vanished. I mean, if the US Embassy in Kenya have, I think I just answered that, right? Didn't I just answer that? No. If the US Embassy in Kenya handles different immigrant visas than any other jurisdiction, does it disenfranchise Kenyan immigrants? Each embassy has the ability to make their own rules about what prioritization they will do. So, they may say, look, immediate relatives are our biggest priority right now, and therefore we're going to reduce the number of DV lottery interviews that we take. They're entitled to do that according to all of the lawsuits and the statements of the government and everything else, and the judges. They've all agreed that the embassies are entitled to make that decision. Is that what you mean? Does that answer your question? I don't know. Oh, Denny found the case. Thank you, Denny. Found in Pesa. So it sounds like it has been, well, hang on. Lucht versus Coloni. No, it won't be Coloni. Why would it be Coloni? Who the hell's Coloni? But you found it in Pesa? Okay, I'll have a look at that. That may be the case. I'm not sure. Why would it be versus Coloni? Who the hell's that? It's filed. Okay, anyway, she's talking about I think you're a she, right, Denny? I'm not sure. Maybe I don't know why, but I've decided in my mind you're a she. But you found the impact lawsuit in Pesa. Does sound odd. It would normally be versus Trump or versus Rubio, but I'm not thinking who Coloni is. But anyway, yeah. So good. I'm glad you found the case. Hopefully that is the right one. Thank you for that. Could you send the link when you get a moment? I'm sure you will on the channel, right? Slavic's apologizing. I take the apology. I accept the apology. Not always on YouTube. You should be. I mean, even if you're not always on YouTube, you need to make sure you know about my videos. My free time right now, I'm just watching. I'll go watch it after this live. There you go. Thank you, man. More data-centered videos, please. It was interesting. Okay, it's good feedback. I'll take that under advisement. I just planned out a series of 30 videos. Would you believe? I used AI to help me plan out a series of videos that I need to schedule and I need to record. But 30 10-minute videos. It's a lot of work. Also, curiosity for you to take on this, and not to offend anyone, but I believe the Trump administration wants white immigrants and is attempting to limit non-white immigration. Am I being too cynical? No, that's fucking obvious, frankly. It's clear that they are doing that. I mean, they're not even hiding it, right? They're saying it out loud. They you know, when they did, if you look at the refugee numbers that were published recently, the only refugees came from South Africa, and the only refugees from South Africa were the white refugees from South Africa. So yeah, I mean, they're not even sort of hiding it at this point. It's very obvious. You know, it's horrific, but it's true. Talked about that. I think I've probably covered all the questions. Oh, if I got to the end, crikey. Let me just quickly answer these last three before. Oh, we got a fourth one. I'm from Fiji, OC 1200. Visa bulletin movement hasn't been much yet. Apart from the pause, my other concern is I'm in UAE. The embassy is closed due to the war. No other suggestion apart from something. Eating. I would try and get moved back to Fiji if I were you. I don't know how long this war is going to continue. Nobody can tell what Trump is going to do, right? And Iran's, Iran's a big enough country and a powerful enough country in their own right, as it were. I mean, they're not really powerful compared to America, but it's a big enough country that they could say, well, we're just going to continue to fight. They don't give a damn, right? And the leadership don't give a damn, whoever is left in the leadership. So if Trump gets, bloody minded with them, and they're bloody minded, they're all stubborn, this could go on for a very long time, right? So, yeah, I would probably be looking to move if I were you. Love the way you give hope to winners until they get nothing at the end. 21 selectees, my mind. Hope dies last is a comment that's often thrown to me, right? And I don't want to take hope away from anyone. And yes, if I'm guilty of anything, and I'm sorry if this is how you feel, but so be it. I might be guilty of trying to keep hope alive until the last minute, because we never know what's going to happen, right? But I try and also remain realistic. I try and point out whether there are problems too. And so in DV 2020 and DV 2021, we had lawsuits that were effective and did win for thousands of people, but it didn't help everyone, right? And you can't save every person. You just do the best you can do, and that includes giving hope. So I'm sorry. I hope that doesn't. You've been through a painful experience by the sound of it, but I hope you don't. Sort of blame me for that. I don't know. I mean, lots of people are blaming me for all sorts of things every day of the week. Do you think the DV application process will open this year? Yes, I do. Hi, Simon. I'm from Fiji. I already answered that one. Already answered that. Yes, all right. We will miss you till next week. Simon, take care. Thank you. All right, everybody. I think I got to the end. Brilliant. Oh, one more. Oh, Joe, I got to answer you. This will be the last question. I don't know about anyone else, but this whole Iran thing is making me want to stay put for a while anyway. I'm super high case number, so the decision has probably been made for me anyway. Yeah, totally agree. I mean, not just, Confusion's going to hate this. I've saved the rant for last. But it's not just the Iran thing, it's the way we've behaved about the Iran thing. We let, another government basically force us into a war. We said we weren't going to do wars, and then we did wars. And then we've threatened all these other countries with tariffs, and we've abused them, and we've taken the piss out of NATO, and we've done all this bad behavior. And then we turn around to those same allies and we say, what do you mean you're not going to help us? You should be helping us. You should send us some minesweepers. I mean, we're just behaving like such a bunch of idiots at the moment. It's not surprising. It will probably put some people off from moving here, because we're just behaving like fools. And the economy is going through a tough time, as it will be going through a tough time globally. Our gas prices have gone up by about 30% in the last couple of weeks. Gas prices will feed through to the economy in general and will increase the prices of all sorts of products that we buy. The economy was already weakened by some of the other decisions this government has made. Our currency has devalued against most of the major currencies over the last year or so. That's yet to feed through. The tariff impact is yet to feed through. We're in a mess in so many ways. And then, we're also we're just seeing the beginning of the AI revolution, which is an industrial revolution. That's going to radically change the way people work. And the American education system is a paid-for thing. So you get free education up until the age of 18. That's paid for by our localized taxes. But after 18, when you go to college, you pay for that education over here, and it's very expensive over here, and it's not as good as the education you get elsewhere. So if I were a parent to a teenager, as I am, outside of America, would I want to bring those kids to America, where right now your only choice, if you're putting them through education, is the current very expensive education system, at the same time where many jobs are about to get hit on the head through AI technologies, which is going to radically change that thing. So, sending a kid off to school now to embark on an education program that's going to cost them $150,000, $200,000, $300,000, which is perfectly possible, when their job is likely to disappear, or be radically changed. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen, but many of the jobs will be very, very different in the future. I mean, to really, would you go to the most expensive place in the world to get your kids educated, in the place in the world that is probably going to be at the leading effort of changing the way those kids will be employed? There's a lot of really difficult decisions that people have got, and then our government's behavior and frankly their inability to cope with some of the stuff that they really should be focusing on, is not looking good. Now I'm here, I'm happy, I'm safe. This is still a good place to be in many, many ways, but there are lots of downsides, right? And it's, we've got a few years of rough weather ahead of us still. Anyway, all right, everybody, I'll call it a day. Thanks for joining me this morning. I hope that was interesting to you. I just went over the 2-hour time, so it's definitely time for me to wrap this up. But thanks for joining me today. Give me a thumbs up on the video if you can. Make sure you're subscribed if you're not already subscribed. And let's keep in touch. And do check out that DB tracker tool. Let me just put that back in the chat. I would like you to go and add your case number information, if you can, on that tracker, because that will help us all, right? The more people that enter that sort of information, the better off we'll be. So yeah, please go and enter your data there. All right. We've had a number of people submitting their submissions during this live, so thank you for those. Thanks for those of you that have done that. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye now.